In a silent mansion marked by sorrow, a sick boy lived isolated among memories and treatments. Everything changes when a street girl breaks into the house seeking shelter and finds something even rarer: connection. Within days, an unlikely friendship blossoms, bringing laughter, courage, and an unexpected suspicion about the boy's true condition. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The Parker estate on Beacon Hill stood as an imposing monument to success and wealth in Boston's elite landscape. Yet behind its majestic facade of red brick and wrought iron gates, a different story unfolded, one of silence, pain, and emptiness. William Parker, one of Massachusetts' most influential biotech entrepreneurs, walked through the halls of his three-story mansion like a ghost, his footsteps echoing against marble floors that once reverberated with laughter. That laughter had died twice in this house. First, when Catherine Parker succumbed to a sudden aneurysm 3 years ago, leaving William a widower at 42. And again just 7 months earlier, when 10-year-old Ethan Parker was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. The boy's bedroom on the second floor had been transformed into a sterile sanctuary. Medical equipment flanked his bed, bottles lined his nightstand, and charts tracking blood counts and medication schedules covered what used to be a wall of superhero posters. Only Captain Atom, the bold superhero who gained his powers through nuclear medicine, remained, an ironic choice that William couldn't bring himself to remove. "I'll be back in 3 days, buddy," William said, sitting on the edge of Ethan's bed one Tuesday morning. His voice carried the rehearsed lightness he'd perfected over months of hospital visits and bad news. "Just a quick trip to New York for the investors. Mrs. Winters will be here, and Nurse Collins is staying overnight." Ethan nodded without looking up from his tablet. His pale fingers swiped mechanically across the screen, his hairless head gleaming under the morning light, streaming through half-drawn curtains. The boy's lack of resistance to his father's leaving was more painful to William than any tantrum could have been. "Dr. Hammond will stop by tomorrow for your checkup," William continued, mentally kicking himself for planning another business trip. But the Parker Pharmaceuticals merger wouldn't finalize itself, and the company was the only thing keeping their medical bills at bay, despite their excellent insurance. "It's okay, Dad," Ethan finally said, his voice soft and hollow. "I know it's important." William fought the urge to cancel everything, to throw his phone out the window and simply hold his son. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to Ethan's forehead. "I love you more than anything in this world. You know that, right?" Another wound to William's heart. 30 minutes later, William's Tesla pulled out of the driveway. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, waved from the front door, while Nurse Collins reviewed medication schedules in the kitchen. Neither noticed the small shadow that darted across the property line as the automated gates began to close. The shadow belonged to 8-year-old Lily. No last name, no parents, no fixed address. Just Lily, with sharp eyes that had seen too much and quick hands that had learned to take what they needed to survive. She'd been watching the Parker house for 3 days, not with malice but with curiosity and hunger that transcended mere food. As the gates inched shut, Lily slipped through the narrowing gap and immediately pressed herself against the ivy-covered wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her breathing remained controlled, a skill learned from 2 years of street survival. Her dirty blonde hair, matted and unwashed for weeks, was stuffed under a frayed Red Sox cap she'd found outside Fenway Park after a game. Her jeans were torn at both knees, and her once white sneakers had long ago surrendered to a permanent grey. This wasn't her first time entering a property uninvited, but it was certainly the grandest. Usually she stuck to apartment buildings, slipping in behind residents and finding utility closets or storage rooms to shelter in for a night. But something about this house had called to her when she'd wandered into Beacon Hill, an area she normally avoided due to its security cameras and vigilant doormen. It was the boy she'd glimpsed through an upstairs window, bald and thin, staring out with empty eyes that matched the hollowness she felt inside. She'd recognized something in him, a kinship of isolation that pulled at her like a magnet. Lily spent the first few hours in the garden shed, counting her breaths and listening to the rhythm of the household. When darkness fell, she crept toward the main house, finding an unlocked window to the basement, a careless oversight in an otherwise secure home. The basement was warm and dry, with storage areas and a wine cellar that provided perfect hiding spots. For 3 days, Lily survived on pilfered food from the kitchen during the night hours, careful to take only what wouldn't be noticed, an apple here, a slice of bread there. She discovered a small bathroom adjacent to the home gym, where she could wash her face and drink clean water. It was the most comfortable she'd been in months. During daylight hours, Lily explored the house when it seemed safe, learning its rhythms. Mrs. Winters spent most of her time in the kitchen and laundry areas. Nurse Collins attended to the boy, came upstairs but took regular breaks to make phone calls in the sunroom. The boy himself rarely left his room. On the 4th day of her secret residence, Lily's curiosity finally overcame her caution. While Nurse Collins was downstairs preparing lunch and Mrs. Winters had stepped out for groceries, Lily crept up to the 2nd floor. The hallway was lined with closed doors, but one stood slightly ajar, letting out the soft sounds of a video game. Moving with practiced silence, Lily approached and peered through the crack. There sat the boy, cross-legged on his bed, playing a game on a large screen mounted on the wall opposite him. His room was surprisingly ordinary beneath the medical equipment. Superhero figurines lined a bookshelf, a telescope pointed out the window, and a collection of science books filled a corner desk. What struck Lily most was the boy's face, not just the absence of hair, but the absence of joy. He played mechanically, his eyes never lighting up when he scored points or advanced levels. It was as if he was simply going through motions to pass time, not to experience pleasure. Lily had seen that look before, on the faces of kids in the temporary shelter where she'd stayed after her mother had abandoned her. It was the look of someone who had already given up. She watched him for nearly 20 minutes, until the sound of footsteps on the stairs sent her scurrying back to the basement. That night, instead of simply taking food, she left something behind, a small perfectly formed paper crane she'd folded from a discarded magazine page, placed on the kitchen counter, where the boy would surely see it when he came down for breakfast. The next morning, hidden behind the laundry room door, she watched as he discovered it. For the first time, his face changed. His eyebrows lifted, his lips parted, and he picked up the crane with careful fingers, turning it over and examining each fold. "Did you make this, Mrs. Winters?" he asked the housekeeper. "Make what, dear?" the older woman replied, looking up. "From her coffee." The boy held up the crane. "This paper bird." Mrs. Winters shook her head, genuinely puzzled. "No, I didn't. Perhaps your father left it before he went on his trip." The boy's expression darkened again, the brief light extinguished. "Dad doesn't do origami." He placed the crane in his pajama pocket and shuffled back upstairs, his breakfast barely touched. That night, Lily folded another crane, this time from a blue paper napkin. She placed it outside his bedroom door. The following morning, she heard his exclamation of surprise, followed by the sound of his door opening wider than it had in days. From her hiding spot in the linen closet, she watched through the slats as he looked up and down the hallway, the blue crane cradled in his palm like a precious gem. "Who's leaving these?" he called out, his voice stronger than she'd heard before. "No," one answered. Mrs. Winters was vacuuming downstairs, and Nurse Collins had stepped into the bathroom. The boy stood in the hallway longer than he had in weeks, looking around with something new in his eyes, curiosity. Lily smiled from her hiding place. She had found a way in, not just into the house, but perhaps into the boy's guarded heart. As she watched him carefully place the second crane next to the first on his nightstand, visible through his open door, she decided that tomorrow she would make herself known. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would change everything, for her, for the boy, and for the silent mansion that had forgotten how to laugh. Chapter 2. Unexpected Friendship. Morning light filtered through the curtains of Ethan's room, casting long shadows across his collection of untouched toys and science kits. He sat, up in bed, immediately reaching for the 2 paper cranes that had taken residence on his nightstand. His fingers traced the careful folds, mind racing with theories about their mysterious appearance. For the first time in months, something had pierced through the fog of medications and treatments that had become his life. "Time for your morning meds, sweetie," Nurse Collins announced, entering with her usual tray of pills and a glass of water. Her smile was professional but warm as she watched him quickly set the paper cranes aside. "Sarah, do you know anything about these paper birds?" Ethan asked, nodding toward the cranes. The nurse adjusted her glasses and looked at the delicate creations. "No, I don't. They're beautiful, though. Maybe your dad left them." Ethan shook his head. "Dad doesn't even have time to eat breakfast with me. He definitely doesn't have time to learn origami." Sarah's face softened with sympathy. "He's doing his best, Ethan. This has been hard on everyone." "I know," the boy mumbled, swallowing his pills without further complaint. The routine was too familiar now. The bitter taste of the medications, the metallic aftertaste of the water from his stainless steel cup, the way Nurse Collins would check his mouth to ensure he'd swallowed everything. After breakfast and his morning tutoring session with Mrs. Winters, who struggled through teaching basic algebra, Ethan was left alone for his rest period. As soon as the door closed, he pulled out his tablet and searched how to make paper cranes, determined to create one himself and perhaps discover who was making them for him. He was so engrossed in a tutorial video that he didn't notice the door slowly creak open. It wasn't until a small shadow fell across his bed that Ethan looked up, startled to find a girl standing in his doorway. She was small and thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days, with a dirty Red Sox cap pulled low over her eyes. "You're the one making the cranes?" Ethan said immediately, more statement than question. The girl nodded, taking a tentative step forward. "I'm Lily," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "How did you get in here?" Ethan asked, not frightened but curious. Lily shrugged. "People don't notice what they're not looking for. I've been here for almost a week." Ethan's eyes widened. "A week? Where have you been sleeping? Eating?" "The basement, mostly. Sometimes the guest room when no one's around. I take food at night when everyone's asleep." She spoke matter-of-factly, without shame or pride, simply stating her reality. Instead of calling for Nurse Collins or Mrs. Winters, Ethan scooted over on his bed, making space. "Want to sit? I was just learning how to make cranes like yours." Lily hesitated only briefly before climbing onto the bed. She smelled of soap. She'd been using the guest bathroom to clean up, but her clothes carried the lingering scent of the streets. "I can teach you. It's easy once you get the hang of it." For the next hour, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the 2 children folded paper together. Ethan found a stack of colorful construction paper in his desk drawer, and Lily showed him the precise folds needed to create the birds. Her small fingers worked with surprising precision and grace. "Why are you bald?" Lily finally asked, looking up from a half-folded green crane. Ethan's hands stilled. "I have leukemia. The medicine makes my hair fall out." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes. Mostly it just makes me tired, and I throw up a lot." Lily nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable information. "I was in a shelter once with a girl who had cancer. She was always cold, even in summer." "Oh, yeah, that happens to me too," Ethan said, surprised by how easy it was to talk about his illness with someone who didn't look at him with pity or fear. "Are you going to die?" Lily asked, the question delivered with the direct innocence only a child could manage. Ethan folded the last crease in his paper, producing a lopsided but recognizable crane. "Dr. Hammond says it's possible, but my dad keeps finding new treatments, so maybe not." "Good," Lily said simply. "I like talking to you." A smile spread across Ethan's face, the first genuine one in months. "I like talking to you too." When Nurse Collins came to check on Ethan at noon, Lily was already hidden in his closet. The door cracked just enough for her to breathe comfortably. After the nurse left, she emerged, and the 2 continued their conversation as if there had been no interruption. Lily told Ethan about life on the streets, not the scary parts, but the interesting ones. She described watching movies through apartment windows, discovering a nest of baby birds under a bridge, and finding a $20 bill that she used to buy a real hamburger and fries at a diner where the waitress let her sit at a corner table, without asking questions. Ethan, in turn, shared stories about life before his diagnosis, the science camp he attended in New Hampshire, his collection of rare minerals, and how his mother used to take him stargazing on clear nights. He showed Lily his telescope, still pointed at the patch of sky where his mother had shown him the Andromeda Galaxy. "My mum left when I was 6, Lily said, peering through the telescope even though it was daytime. She said she was going to the store, but she never came back." "That's awful," Ethan replied, genuinely horrified. Lily shrugged again, her default response to difficult truths. "It happens. The foster home was okay until it got too crowded. Then I decided I could take care of myself better." "How long?" "Have you been on your own?" "Almost 2 years, I think. I'm 8 now. At least that's what my mom told me before she left." The revelation stunned Ethan into silence. This girl, smaller than him and 2 years younger, had been surviving alone on the streets of Boston while he'd been here in his comfortable room, attended by nurses and housekeepers, with a father who, despite his absences, clearly cared for him. "You can stay here," Ethan declared suddenly. "Not just in the basement, here in my room. I have a trundle bed." He pointed to the space under his bed, where a second mattress could be pulled out. "Sarah only checks on me once during the night, at midnight. You can hide in the closet then." Lily's eyes lit up. "Really? You won't tell on me?" "Never," Ethan promised. "It'll be our secret." That night, after Nurse Collins had checked his vitals and Mrs. Winters had turned in for the evening, Ethan pulled out the trundle bed. Lily emerged from her hiding spot in his bathroom and slipped under the covers, a look of wonder on her face as she sank into the soft mattress. "This is like a hotel," she whispered. "What do you know about hotels?" Ethan asked, leaning over the edge of his bed to look at her. "I snuck into the Marriott once and watched TV in an empty room until housekeeping found me," she said with a grin. "The beds were nice, but not this nice." They talked until Lily's responses grew drowsy and eventually stopped altogether. Ethan watched her sleep for a while, fascinated by this strange, brave girl who had somehow found her way into his sterile, lonely world. For the first time since his diagnosis, Ethan fell asleep without fear, clutching at his chest. The steady rhythm of Lily's breathing below him was more comforting than any of the medications or treatments he'd endured. The next morning, Lily was gone from the trundle bed before dawn, safely hidden away before Mrs. Winters came in to open the curtains. But on Ethan's nightstand sat a new crane, this one made from the foil wrapper of his chocolate pudding cup from dinner. Next to it was a note scrawled in uneven handwriting. "See you when the grown-ups leave. Your friend, Lily." Ethan traced the word friend with his finger. It had been so long since he'd had a real one. The kids from school had stopped visiting months ago, uncomfortable with his illness and unsure what to say to a classmate who might not make it to middle school. When Mrs. Winters remarked on his improved appetite at breakfast, Ethan just smiled and asked for seconds. He had a secret now, a purpose beyond enduring treatments and making it through each day. He had someone to protect, someone who, strangely enough, seemed to be protecting him too. The pattern continued for days. Lily would appear in Ethan's room when the coast was clear, bringing stories from her explorations of the house and grounds. She taught him card tricks she'd learned from street performers in the Common, and he showed her his collection of science books, reading aloud from them when she admitted she wasn't very good at reading herself. One afternoon, a week into their secret friendship, Ethan had a particularly bad reaction to his medication. He barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently, his thin body shaking with the effort. Lily, who had been hiding in his closet during Dr. Hammond's visit, emerged to find him collapsed beside the toilet. Without hesitation, she wet a washcloth with cool water and pressed it to his forehead. She helped him back to bed with surprising strength for her size, then brought him water and held his hand until the shaking subsided. "You don't have to stay," Ethan whispered, embarrassed by his weakness. "It's gross when I get sick like this." "I've seen worse," Lily replied simply. Once I saw a man throw up an entire hot dog bun and all on the subway platform. This is nothing." Her matter-of-fact response made Ethan laugh, which made him wince in pain, which made them both laugh harder, trying to stay quiet so Nurse Collins wouldn't hear them from downstairs. It was the first time Ethan had laughed since his diagnosis. The sound was rusty and strange in his own ears, but it felt good, like stretching a muscle that had been cramped for too long. That evening, as they sat together on his bed playing a muted video game, Ethan realized something profound. In the midst of his illness, in the middle of his carefully monitored existence, he had found something that all the medical treatments couldn't provide: joy. Chapter 3. Discovery. William Parker returned from his New York trip earlier than expected. The merger negotiations had concluded successfully, and for once he'd prioritized getting home to Ethan over the celebratory dinner his partners had planned. As his car pulled into the driveway of the Beacon Hill estate, he noticed something unusual, light spilling from Ethan's bedroom window and what sounded like muffled laughter. The sound was so foreign, so unexpected, that William paused at the front door, key in hand, wondering if he was imagining things. It had been months since he'd heard Ethan laugh. The sound tugged at something in his chest, a mixture of hope and guilt that had become his constant companion. Inside, he greeted Mrs. Winters, who was surprised but pleased by his early return. "Ethan's had a good day," she reported. "He ate all his dinner and even asked for seconds at lunch. Nurse Collins said his energy levels seem improved." William nodded, distracted by the strange normalcy of the report. Good days had become rare enough that they warranted special mention. "I'll go up and see him." "He might be asleep," Mrs. Winters cautioned. "He seemed tired after his evening meds." But as William climbed the stairs, he heard it again. Definite laughter, followed by a hushed "shh" that didn't sound like his son's voice. Frowning, he quickened his pace. Had one of Ethan's school friends finally come to visit? But it was nearly 9 o'clock on a school night. He paused outside Ethan's door, listening. There was movement inside, the soft sounds of conversation. Slowly, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted him was so unexpected that William froze in the doorway. Ethan was sitting cross-legged on his bed, color in his cheeks and animation in his face that had been absent for months. Across from him sat a small, disheveled girl with dirty blonde hair, holding playing cards in her hands. Around them were scattered origami cranes of various sizes and colors. Both children looked up at him with identical expressions of surprise and dismay. "Dad!" Ethan exclaimed, instinctively moving in front of the girl as if to shield her. "You're home early." "Clearly," William replied, finding his voice. His gaze shifted to the stranger in his son's bedroom. "And who might this be?" The girl stared back at him with wary green eyes, her body tensed like an animal ready to flee. She was painfully thin, her clothes worn and mismatched, though relatively clean. Despite her obvious alarm, there was a dignity in her posture, a defiance that spoke of someone used to facing challenges head-on. "This is Lily," Ethan said when it became clear the girl wouldn't speak for herself. "She's my friend." William stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. His mind raced with questions and concerns. Who was this child? How had she gotten into their home? Where were her parents? "Hello, Lily," he said carefully, keeping his voice neutral despite his racing thoughts. "I'm Ethan's father, William Parker. May I ask how you came to be in my son's bedroom?" Lily glanced at Ethan, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I came through the basement window," she admitted. "It was unlocked." William raised his eyebrows. That was concerning from a security standpoint, but not his immediate focus. "And why did you come into our home, Lily?" The girl's chin lifted slightly. "I was curious and hungry, but I didn't steal anything important, just food nobody would miss." "She's been here for over a week, Dad," Ethan interjected, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "She's been sleeping in the basement or in my trundle bed. She made me the paper cranes. She's the reason I've been feeling better." William's mind struggled to process this information. A homeless child had been living in their house for over a week without anyone noticing? It seemed impossible, yet here she was. And Ethan, his sick, withdrawn son, was animated and protective, looking more alive than he had in months. "Where are your parents, Lily?" William asked, softening his tone as he noticed her increasing tension. "Don't have any," she replied. "My mom left 2 years ago, never knew my dad. And you've been on your own since then? No foster home, no relatives?" "I was in a group home for a while. It wasn't good. I left." Her answers were clipped, factual, devoid of self-pity. William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of stress that had become habitual since Ethan's diagnosis. This situation was beyond anything he'd expected to deal with tonight. He should call the authorities, have them find proper placement for this child. It was the responsible thing to do. And yet, he looked at his son, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. Ethan's eyes were clear and alert, his posture straight instead of slumped. The ever-present shadows beneath his eyes seemed lighter. Most strikingly, his expression as he looked at Lily was protective and animated, emotions William hadn't seen since before the diagnosis. "You should let her stay, Dad," Ethan said, reading the conflict on his father's face. "She doesn't have anywhere else to go, and she helps me. When I got sick yesterday after my treatment, she took care of me. She doesn't get scared or grossed out like the other kids." "Ethan, it's not that simple," William began. "There are laws about—" "Please," Ethan interrupted, his voice breaking. "She's my friend, my only friend. Everyone else stopped coming around when I got sick." The raw plea in his son's voice struck William like a physical blow. He looked at Lily again, noting the intelligent caution in her eyes. This child had survived on Boston streets for 2 years. She'd managed to live in their home undetected for over a week. And somehow, against all odds, she'd connected with Ethan in a way that all the child psychologists and therapy sessions hadn't been able to achieve. "Are you hungry, Lily?" William finally asked, making a decision that surprised even himself. The girl nodded cautiously. "Then let's go downstairs and get you a proper meal while we figure this out. I think there's leftover lasagna that Mrs. Winters made." Relief flooded Ethan's face. Lily, however, remained wary, looking between father and son with uncertainty. "It's okay," Ethan assured her. "My dad's not going to call the police or anything." "Right, Dad?" William nodded slowly. "Not tonight, at least. Tonight we're just going to talk." The scene in the kitchen 20 minutes later was surreal. Mrs. Winters, after recovering from her shock, had heated up lasagna and garlic bread, which Lily was consuming with the focused determination of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Ethan sat beside her, occasionally nudging more bread onto her plate when she finished a piece, while William watched them both from across the table. "So you've been teaching Ethan origami?" William asked, attempting normal conversation in an decidedly abnormal situation. Lily nodded, swallowing a large bite. "My mom taught me before she left. It's the only thing I remember about her that's good." "Lily makes the best cranes," Ethan said proudly. "She can make them out of anything, napkins, candy wrappers, even foil." "I've noticed he's been more energetic lately," Nurse Collins remarked, having joined them after William explained the situation. "More appetite, better color. I thought it was just a good week." "It's because of Lily," Ethan insisted. "She tells me stories and makes me laugh. She doesn't treat me like I'm made of glass." William observed the easy companionship between the two children. There was something remarkable in how they'd found each other. Ethan, isolated by illness in his luxury prison, and Lily, hardened by street life yet still capable of friendship and care. "Where have you been sleeping before you came here, Lily?" William asked gently. The girl shrugged, reaching for another piece of garlic bread. "Different places, shelters sometimes when it's really cold, empty buildings, church basements, and school. I went until my mom left, then for a while at the group home. I can read a little and do basic math." There was a hint of pride in her voice at this admission. William exchanged glances with Nurse Collins, whose professional compassion was clearly warring with her duty to report a child in need. "She can't go back to a group home, Dad," Ethan said, reading the adults' expressions. "She said they were mean there, and she wouldn't stay anyway. She'd just run away again, right, Lily?" Lily nodded firmly. "I always find a way out." The conviction in her young voice was both impressive and heartbreaking. This small, fierce survivor had endured more in her 8 years than most adults faced in a lifetime. "It's late," William finally said. "Too late to make any decisions. Tonight, Lily, you can stay in one of the guest rooms, a real room, not hiding in the basement or in Ethan's closet." Suspicion flashed across the girl's face. "You're not going to call someone to take me away while I'm sleeping?" William met her gaze directly. "No, I promise you that. Tomorrow, we'll figure things out. But tonight, you're our guest." Nurse. Collins showed Lily to a guest room, helping her find a t-shirt of Ethan's to sleep in and showing her how to use the shower. William tucked Ethan into bed, a ritual he'd neglected too often lately in his grief and business distractions. "She makes me feel normal again, Dad," Ethan whispered as William pulled the covers up. "When I'm with her, I forget about being sick all the time." William's throat tightened. "I can see that, buddy. She seems like a special kid." "She is. And she doesn't have anybody. Not like I have you." The simple statement hit William with unexpected force. Despite his absences and struggle to cope with Ethan's illness, his son still counted him as present, as someone he had. It was both a comfort and an indictment. "Get some sleep," William said, kissing Ethan's forehead. "We'll talk more tomorrow." Later. That night, unable to sleep, William checked on both children. Ethan was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, his breathing even, his face relaxed. In the guest room, he found Lily curled into a tight ball in the center of the king-sized bed, as if even in sleep, she was trying to take up as little space as possible. William stood in the doorway, watching this strange child who had somehow bypassed all his home's security measures and found her way to his son's heart. The responsible course of action was clear. Contact child services in the morning, let the system take over. It was what any reasonable parent would do. But as he closed the guest room door and headed back to his own bedroom, William found himself remembering the sound of Ethan's laughter, the animation in his face as he defended his new friend, the protective way he'd moved in front of her when William entered the room. For the first time since Catherine's death and Ethan's diagnosis, William allowed himself to consider that sometimes the most healing things came from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes doing the responsible thing wasn't necessarily doing the right thing. The next morning, William woke to the unfamiliar sound of childish voices and laughter coming from the kitchen. Following the noise, he found Ethan and Lily attempting to make pancakes with Mrs. Winters supervising. Flour dusted the countertops and both children's faces, but Ethan's smile was wide and genuine as he flipped a misshapen pancake. "Dad, we're making breakfast," Ethan called when he spotted his father. "Lily's never made pancakes before, but she's really good at flipping them." William leaned against the doorframe, taking in the domestic scene. "I can see that. Good morning, Lily." The girl looked up, caution still evident in her posture, but slightly less pronounced than the night before. "Morning, Mr. Parker. I helped clean up the kitchen first before we started cooking." "She's a very conscientious guest," Mrs. Winters confirmed with a small smile, "and quite handy with a spatula." As William accepted a cup of coffee and joined them at the breakfast counter, he realized he'd already made his decision. Logic and responsibility might dictate one course of action, but his heart and his son's newfound joy pointed in a different direction entirely. Chapter 4. Growing Suspicions. 2 weeks had passed since William Parker discovered Lily in his son's bedroom. Against all conventional wisdom and the cautious advice of his lawyer, William had made temporary arrangements for the girl to stay with them. He'd informed child services that he was considering becoming a foster parent, a half-truth that bought them time while he figured out a more permanent solution. The transformation in Ethan during those 2 weeks was remarkable. He'd gained 3 pounds, spent more time out of bed than in it, and even ventured into the backyard on warmer days, something he hadn't done in months. Dr. Hammond expressed surprise at Ethan's improved blood counts during his weekly visit, attributing it to the latest round of experimental treatments. Lily had been given the guest room across from Ethan's as her own space, the first private room she'd had since her mother left. She approached this newfound stability with cautious optimism, still keeping a small backpack of essentials ready by the door, just in case. Old habits of survival died hard. William had enrolled her in the same private tutoring program as Ethan, discovering that despite gaps in her formal education, she was remarkably bright. She absorbed new information like a sponge, particularly in mathematics and science. Her reading skills, initially behind for her age, improved rapidly under Mrs. Winter's patient guidance. On a crisp autumn Wednesday, Lily sat cross-legged on Ethan's bedroom floor, surrounded by colorful construction paper, as she worked on a new origami project. Ethan was having one of his treatment days when the medications left him too nauseated and weak to do much besides rest. He lay on his bed, watching Lily work, occasionally offering suggestions. "What are you making this time?" he asked, his voice slightly hoarse from the morning's bout of vomiting. "A dragon," Lily replied, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. "It's harder than the cranes. You have to fold it just right, or the wings don't stay up." Ethan leaned over the edge of his bed to get a better look. "That's awesome. When I'm feeling better, you can teach me how to make one too." Lily glanced up at him, her green eyes thoughtful. Over the past weeks, she'd been watching Ethan carefully, not just as a friend, but with the analytical gaze of someone who had learned to assess situations for survival. Something about his illness pattern didn't make sense to her. "Can I ask you something?" she said, setting down her half-finished dragon. "Sure. How come some days you feel really sick, but other days you seem totally fine?" Ethan frowned. "Dr. Hammond says that's normal with leukemia. Some days are good, some days are bad. But it's always on the same days," Lily pointed out. "You always get sick on Wednesdays after Dr. Hammond visits, and on Sundays after Nurse Collins gives you the orange pills. But Thursdays through Saturdays, you're almost normal." "Huh," Ethan said, genuinely surprised by her observation. "I never noticed that pattern." "I notice patterns," Lily said with a shrug. "When you live on the streets, you have to know which days the bakery on Charles Street throws out fresh bread, or which nights the security guard at the public library takes an extra long break so you can stay warm inside." Ethan considered this. "So you think there's something weird about when I get sick?" "I lived in a shelter with a girl who had cancer," Lily said, returning to her origami. "Maria, she was really sick all the time, not just on specific days. And she was always cold, always tired. You get really sick sometimes, but then you bounce back so fast. Yesterday you beat me at basketball in the driveway. Maria could never have done that, even on her good days." A troubled expression crossed Ethan's face. "Maybe my cancer is different from hers? Dr. Hammond says I have a rare type." "Maybe," Lily conceded, but her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. "Or maybe—" "Maybe what?" Lily hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing. It's probably stupid." "Tell me," Ethan insisted, sitting up despite his nausea. "You can tell me anything, Lily. We promised. No secrets." She met his eyes, her expression unusually serious. "What if you're not as sick as everyone thinks you are?" The question hung in the air between them, both impossible and compelling. Ethan had lived with his diagnosis for so long that questioning it seemed almost sacrilegious. His entire existence had been reorganized around his illness. The medications, the treatments, the careful monitoring, the grief and fear that permeated the household. "That's crazy," he finally said. "Dr. Hammond shows Dad my test results every week. There are charts and numbers and blood counts." "Have you ever seen them?" Lily pressed. "The actual results?" "Well, no," Ethan admitted. "They talk about them when I'm resting, or in another room." Lily's fingers resumed their careful folding. "It's probably nothing. Forget I said anything." But Ethan couldn't forget. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it took root in his mind, growing stronger as the day progressed. That night, as Nurse Collins administered his evening medication, he found himself studying the pills with new suspicion. "What exactly does this one do?" he asked, holding up a small blue capsule. Sarah Collins smiled. "That's to help with your immune system, sweetie. Your white blood cells need all the help they can get. And this one," he pointed to a white tablet, "that's for inflammation. It helps keep you comfortable." Ethan swallowed the medications as usual, but for the first time he wondered what they were really doing to his body. Was he sick because of leukemia, or sick because of the treatments for leukemia? The distinction suddenly seemed important. The next morning, Lily found Ethan in the home library surrounded by medical books from his father's collection. Most were beyond his comprehension level, filled with technical terminology and complex diagrams, but he was determinedly making his way through a basic text on oncology. "I'm looking up symptoms of leukemia," he explained when she raised an eyebrow at him. "And treatments too." Lily sat beside him, pulling one of the books onto her lap. "Find anything?" "Kind of. It says here that patients usually get chemotherapy in cycles, not every few days like I do, and there are specific blood tests that show if the cancer is getting better or worse." He rubbed his hairless head in frustration. "But I don't understand most of the words." "We need to see your actual test results," Lily said decisively. "How?" "They're probably in Dr. Hammond's office, or on Dad's computer, which is password protected." Lily gave him a mischievous look. "I'm pretty good at finding things people don't want found. Remember how I lived in your house for a week without anyone knowing?" "You want to sneak into Dr. Hammond's office?" Ethan's eyes widened in alarm. "That's impossible. It's all the way across town, and I'm not supposed to leave the house except for hospital visits." "Not his office," Lily clarified. "But your dad keeps files in his home office, right? I've seen Nurse Collins putting reports in there after Dr. Hammond leaves." Ethan hesitated. Entering his father's private office without permission felt like a major betrayal of trust. Yet the question Lily had raised wouldn't leave him alone. What if he wasn't as sick as everyone thought? "Dad's at work until dinner," he finally said. "And Mrs. Winters is doing grocery shopping. Nurse Collins is catching up on charting in the sunroom." "Perfect," Lily said, standing up. "Let's go now." William Parker's home office was on the first floor, a stately room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive mahogany desk, and windows overlooking the garden. It was usually locked when he wasn't home, but Lily approached the door with confidence. "It's probably locked," Ethan whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a bobby pin. "Not a problem." With practiced ease, she bent the pin into a specific shape and inserted it into the lock. After a few seconds of gentle manipulation, there was a soft click. "How did you learn to do that?" Ethan asked, impressed despite his anxiety. "A guy at one of the shelters taught me. He said it was an important survival skill." She pushed the door open. "Come on, we don't have much time." Inside, the office was meticulously organized. Files were arranged in cabinets along one wall, while the desk held a computer, a lamp, and several framed photos of Ethan and his mother. Seeing his mother's smiling face made Ethan hesitate again. "We shouldn't be doing this," he said. "Dad will be really upset if he finds out." "Don't you want to know the truth?" Lily countered, already opening the filing cabinet labeled medical. "If I'm wrong, no harm done. But if I'm right..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. If she was right, everything changed. Together they pulled out folders labeled with Ethan's name, spreading them across the floor. Most contained insurance forms, hospital bills and treatment authorizations. Paperwork that meant little to either child. But in one folder they found what they were looking for. Lab reports spanning the past 6 months, each bearing Ethan's name and Dr. Hammond's signature. "I don't understand any of this," Ethan said, staring at columns of numbers and medical abbreviations. "What's WBC? What's a hemoglobin level supposed to be?" Lily was quiet, studying a series of reports with unusual intensity for an 8-year-old. "These look different," she finally said, separating out several pages. "See how the paper is slightly different, and the font too." Ethan looked more closely. She was right. Some reports were printed on paper with the hospital's letterhead, while others were on plain paper with just Dr. Hammond's clinic logo. The hospital reports dated from the initial diagnosis period, while the more recent ones all came from Dr. Hammond's private practice. "So?" Dad said Dr. Hammond took over my case because he specializes in rare leukemias. "But look at this," Lily insisted, placing 2 reports side by side. "This one is from the hospital 6 months. Hago." And this one is from Dr. Hammond last week. The numbers are almost the same, but this little mark is different. She pointed to a subtle variation in how the decimal points were placed. That could just be different printers, Ethan reasoned, though doubt was creeping into his voice. Maybe, Lily admitted, but I think we should show these to your dad. Ethan's heart raced at the suggestion. I can't tell him we broke into his office. He'll be furious. More furious than if you're taking medicine you don't need, Lily challenged, her green eyes intense. What if I'm right, Ethan? What if you're not really as sick as everyone thinks? Before Ethan could respond, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Hastily, they gathered the papers, shoving them back into their folders and returning them to the filing cabinet. They had just closed the drawer when the office door swung open wider, revealing William Parker standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of surprise and disappointment. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. Ethan froze, but Lily stepped forward. "It's my fault, Mr. Parker. I wanted to see the pictures of Ethan's mom and I picked the lock. I'm sorry." William's gaze moved from Lily to his son, clearly not believing this explanation. "Ethan, the truth, please." Ethan swallowed hard, looking at the framed photos on his father's desk. His mother's smile seemed to encourage honesty. "We were looking at my medical records," he admitted. "We wanted to see my test results." "Why?" William asked, entering the room fully and closing the door behind him. "You know you can ask me anything about your treatment, Ethan. Why go behind my back?" Ethan looked at Lily, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "Because he," began, then faltered. How could he voice the suspicion without sounding ungrateful or paranoid? "Because I think Ethan might not be as sick as Dr. Hammond says," Lily stated boldly. "He gets sick on a weird schedule, only after certain treatments, and he recovers too fast in between. The girl I knew with cancer was never like that." William's face registered shock, then a flash of anger that quickly subsided into concern. He looked at his son. "Is that what you think too, Ethan?" "I don't know what to think, Dad," Ethan replied honestly. "But I wanted to see for myself. I'm tired of everyone talking about me like I'm not there, deciding things for me, looking at me like I might break. I just wanted to know." William was quiet for a long moment, studying both children. Then, to their surprise, he walked to his desk and sat down, gesturing for them to take the chairs opposite him. "I understand wanting to know about your own health," he said carefully. "That's your right, Ethan. But breaking into my office isn't the way to go about it. You could have asked me. Would you have shown me everything?" Ethan challenged, a new confidence in his voice that hadn't been there before Lily arrived in their lives. William hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, Ethan saw the truth. His father would have filtered the information, presenting only what he thought Ethan could handle. "I want to see all my test results," Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. "And I want someone besides Dr. Hammond to explain them to me. Someone who will tell me the truth, even if it's..." William looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time, not as a patient, not as a child to be protected, but as a person with a right to understand his own life. Then his gaze shifted to Lily, the unlikely catalyst for this transformation. "You think Dr. Hammond is lying about Ethan's condition?" he asked her directly. Lily met his eyes unflinchingly. "I think something's not right. And I think Ethan deserves to know if it's true or not." William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that both children now recognized as his response to stress. "This is a serious accusation, Lily. Dr. Hammond is one of the most respected oncologists in Boston." "I know," she acknowledged. "That's why we need proof before saying anything. Real proof, not just my feelings." "And what would you consider real proof?" William asked, curious despite his skepticism. "A second opinion," Ethan interjected before Lily could respond, "from a different doctor at a different hospital, with new tests that Dr. Hammond doesn't know about." The room fell silent as William considered this. The request was reasonable, prudent even. Many patients sought second opinions for serious diagnoses, yet he'd never considered it for Ethan, trusting completely in Dr. Hammond's expertise and reputation. "All right," he finally said, "I'll arrange for a second opinion. No mention of it to Dr. Hammond or Nurse Collins until we have the results. This stays between the three of us." Relief washed over Ethan's face. "Really, you believe us?" "I believe that you have the right to understand your condition fully," William clarified, "and I believe in covering all bases. If Dr. Hammond's diagnosis is confirmed, we continue treatment with confidence. If not," he left the sentence unfinished, unwilling to voice the possibility that they'd been pursuing unnecessary treatments. "Thank you, Dad," Ethan said, standing up to hug his father. As William's arms encircled his son, he looked over Ethan's shoulder at Lily, who remained in her chair watching them with a mixture of satisfaction and lingering suspicion. This strange, perceptive child had upended their carefully managed routine, challenging assumptions they'd lived with for months. Whether her suspicions proved founded or not, William realized that her presence had already changed their family in ways he couldn't have imagined. Ethan was asking questions, demanding agency, engaging with his condition instead of passively enduring it. And that, regardless of medical outcomes, was a kind of healing in itself. Chapter 5. The Second. Opinion. The Massachusetts General Hospital Pediatric Wing was a stark contrast to Dr. Hammond's private practice, where Hammond's office was hushed and exclusive, with expensive artwork and a single patient seen at a time. Mass General buzzed with activity, doctors rushing between rooms, families in various states of worry or relief, the organized chaos of a top medical institution. William had told Dr. Hammond that they were taking a long weekend to visit relatives in Vermont, explaining that Ethan needed a break from the routine of treatments. Hammond had reluctantly agreed, adjusting the medication schedule and providing detailed instructions for what to do if Ethan's condition worsened during their trip. "I'm nervous," Ethan confessed as they sat in the waiting room of the pediatric oncology department. He wore a Red Sox cap pulled low over his bald head, his fingers fidgeting with the zipper of his jacket. "What if Dr. Hammond was right all along? What if I'm wasting everyone's time?" "Then we go back to the treatment plan with more confidence," William assured him, though his own stomach churned with anxiety. The possibility that they'd been misled about Ethan's condition was almost too disturbing to contemplate. Lily sat on Ethan's other side, her legs swinging above the floor. William had been surprised when Ethan insisted she come along, but now he was grateful for her steady presence. Unlike Ethan and himself, Lily showed no signs of nervousness. She observed everything with calm curiosity, occasionally making quiet observations about the other patients or the hospital equipment. "Dr. Hammond's waiting room doesn't have other kids in it," she noted, watching a toddler in a wheelchair being entertained by a child life specialist. "And the nurses here smile more." William had pulled every string at his disposal to get this appointment on short notice. Dr. Elena Ramirez was one of the top pediatric oncologists in the country, known for her groundbreaking research on childhood leukemias. She had agreed to see Ethan as a favor to a mutual colleague, squeezing them in at the end of her Friday clinic. Ethan Parker, a nurse, appeared, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Ramirez is ready for you." William stood, placing a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Remember, buddy, we're just getting another doctor's perspective, nothing to be afraid of." Ethan nodded, reaching for Lily's hand as they followed the nurse down a brightly painted hallway decorated with artwork from young patients. Unlike at Dr. Hammond's office, here they were led to an examination room first, not directly to the doctor's private office. "Dr. Ramirez will be with you shortly," the nurse said, handing Ethan a hospital gown. "Please change into this, and she'll do a physical exam before discussing your case." When the nurse left, Ethan looked at his father in confusion. "Dr. Hammond never does physical exams anymore. He just reviews my blood work." "Different doctors have different approaches," William explained, though he too found it strange. When had Dr. Hammond last performed a thorough physical examination of Ethan? He couldn't remember. Dr. Ramirez entered 10 minutes later, a tall woman with salt and pepper, hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her white coat bore colorful pins, a rainbow, a superhero logo, a cartoon character, clearly meant to put her young patients at ease. "Hello, Ethan," she said warmly, extending her hand first to him, not to William. "I'm Dr. Ramirez. Thank you for coming to see me today." Ethan shook her hand solemnly. "This is my dad, and this is my friend Lily," he introduced. Dr. Ramirez acknowledged them both with a smile before turning her attention back to Ethan. I understand you've been receiving treatment for leukemia for about 7 months now, is that right? Yes, Ethan confirmed. Dr. Hammond says I have a rare subtype that needs special treatment. I see, Dr. Ramirez said, making a note on her tablet. And how have you been feeling lately? What followed was a 30-minute conversation, unlike any Ethan had experienced with Dr. Hammond. Dr. Ramirez asked detailed questions about his symptoms, energy levels, appetite, and activities. She performed a thorough physical examination, checking his lymph nodes, pressing gently on his abdomen, testing his reflexes, and examining the inside of his mouth. Throughout the exam, she explained what she was looking for and why, addressing her comments to Ethan directly rather than to William. Lily watched the process with intense interest, occasionally nodding as if confirming something to herself. Ethan, I'd like to run some new tests today, Dr. Ramirez said when the examination was complete. We'll take some blood, and I'd also like to do a bone marrow aspiration. Ethan's face paled. That's the one where they put a needle in my hip bone, right? It really hurts. Dr. Ramirez nodded sympathetically. It can be uncomfortable, yes, but we'll use medication to numb the area and help you relax. The information we get from it is very important to understand exactly what's happening with your blood cells. When will we have the results? William asked, struggling to keep his voice neutral. I've arranged for expedited processing. We should have preliminary results by tomorrow afternoon, and I've cleared my schedule to meet with you then. She looked at William directly. I understand the urgency of your situation, Mr. Parker. There was something in her tone that made William wonder how much she suspected about their reasons for seeking a second opinion. He'd been deliberately vague when making the appointment, saying only that they wanted confirmation of Ethan's diagnosis and treatment plan. Thank you, he said simply. After Dr. Ramirez left to arrange the tests, Ethan turned to his father. She's different from Dr. Hammond. How so? William asked. She talks to me not just about me, and she touched me, checked my body. Dr. Hammond just looks at his computer and talks about numbers. William felt a chill run through him. How? Had he not noticed this difference before? He'd been so overwhelmed by the diagnosis, so desperate to trust the specialist who promised to save his son, that he'd overlooked basic elements of medical care. The tests proceeded as Dr. Ramirez had described. Ethan was brave through the blood draws, and though he cried during the bone marrow aspiration despite the sedation, he didn't complain afterward. Lily stayed by his side throughout, telling him stories about a stray cat she'd once befriended, to distract him from the pain. They checked into a hotel near the hospital afterward. Ethan was exhausted from the procedures and fell asleep almost immediately. William sat in a chair by the window, watching the Boston skyline as night fell, his mind racing with doubts and fears. You're worried, Lily said, startling him. He thought she was asleep in the rollaway bed the hotel had provided. Yes, he admitted, seeing no point in hiding it from this unusually perceptive child. I'm worried about what we'll find out tomorrow. Lily padded across the room in her borrowed pajamas. They'd had to stop at a department store to buy her appropriate clothes for the hotel stay, and sat on the arm of his chair. If Ethan's really sick, the medicines will help him, she said, pragmatically. And if he's not as sick as Dr. Hammond said, then that's good news, right? It's not that simple, William sighed. If Dr. Hammond has been... He couldn't bring himself to say the words. Lying, Lily supplied bluntly. Giving Ethan medicine he doesn't need? Yes, if that's happening, it means I failed to protect my son. I'm his father. I'm supposed to keep him safe, make the right decisions for him. Lily considered this, her small face serious in the dim light. My mom was supposed to protect me too, she finally said. But she left. At least you're still here trying to figure it out. The simple observation, devoid of judgment or sentimentality, struck William deeply. He'd been so caught up in his potential failure that he'd overlooked the more important truth. He was still fighting for his son, still trying to make things right. Thank you, Lily, he said softly. You're pretty wise for an 8-year-old. She shrugged. Not wise, just seen a lot of stuff. The next afternoon found them back At Dr. Ramirez's office. This time they were shown into a conference room rather than an examination room. The change in setting heightened William's anxiety. Conference rooms were for serious discussions, for news that required privacy and time. Dr. Ramirez entered carrying a tablet and several folders. Her expression was carefully neutral, which did nothing to calm William's nerves. "Thank you for coming back," she began, sitting across from them. "I've reviewed all of Ethan's test results, both the ones we ran yesterday and the previous records you provided from Dr. Hammond." She opened one of the folders and spread several papers on the table. "I'm going to be very direct with you, Mr. Parker. There are significant discrepancies between our findings and the recent reports from Dr. Hammond's office." William's heart seemed to stop. Beside him, Ethan sat very still while Lily leaned forward slightly. "What kind of discrepancies?" William managed to ask. Dr. Ramirez pointed to several numbers on the lab reports. "According to our tests, Ethan's blood counts are within normal ranges for a child his age. His bone marrow shows no sign of leukemic cells. In fact," she paused, looking directly at Ethan, "based on our findings alone, I would not diagnose you with leukemia at all." The room seemed to tilt. William gripped the edge of the table. "But that's not possible. He was diagnosed 7 months ago. Multiple tests confirmed it." "Yes, I've reviewed those initial hospital tests from the time of diagnosis," Dr. Ramirez confirmed. "They do indeed show abnormalities consistent with leukemia, but something very unusual appears to have happened." She pulled out another set of papers. "These are your most recent tests from Dr. Hammond's office, dated just 2 weeks ago. They indicate ongoing disease requiring aggressive treatment." "But your tests show I'm healthy?" Ethan asked, his voice small but steady. Dr. Ramirez's expression softened. "Not just healthy, Ethan. Your bone marrow is remarkably normal for someone supposedly undergoing intensive chemotherapy. There should be evidence of the treatment's effect on your healthy cells, even if the cancer was responding well. But I don't see that evidence." "What are you saying exactly?" William asked, though he was beginning to understand with horrible clarity. "I'm saying that either Ethan has experienced a medical miracle with a complete, spontaneous remission that somehow left no trace of either disease or treatment in his bone marrow, which is frankly impossible, or the recent test results from Dr. Hammond aren't accurate," William finished. "Dr. Ramirez nodded gravely. "I can't speak to how or why the discrepancies exist, but as Ethan's physician today, my medical opinion is that he does not currently have leukemia and does not require ongoing chemotherapy treatment." Lily's hand found Ethan's under the table, squeezing it tightly. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew something wasn't right." "What about my hair?" Ethan asked, removing his cap to reveal his smooth scalp. "And the sickness?" "I throw up after treatments. I get tired." "The medications you've been receiving would cause those side effects whether you have leukemia or not," Dr. Ramirez explained gently. "Chemotherapy drugs are powerful. They affect healthy people just as they affect cancer patients." William felt a rage building inside him, a white-hot fury unlike anything he'd experienced before. "Are you telling me that my son has been receiving chemotherapy he doesn't need? That he's been suffering for months unnecessarily?" "I can't comment on Dr. Hammond's treatment decisions without more information," Dr. Ramirez said carefully. "But I can tell you that based on the tests we ran yesterday, there is no medical justification for continuing chemotherapy at this time." "Could the initial diagnosis have been wrong?" William pressed. "Could he never have had leukemia at all?" Dr. Ramirez hesitated. "The initial hospital tests do show abnormalities. It's possible that Ethan had a condition that resolved on its own, or that was misdiagnosed. Without re-examining those original samples, I can't say for certain." "But I'm okay now." Ethan's voice cut through the adult conversation, bringing everyone's focus back to the child at the center of the storm. "I'm not going to die?" Dr. Ramirez reached across the table and took his hand. "Based on everything I can see, Ethan, you are a healthy 10-year-old boy. Your body is strong and resilient. And no, I see no evidence that you are in any danger of dying." Tears filled Ethan's eyes, but they weren't tears of fear or pain. They were tears of relief, of a burden being lifted that he'd carried for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. He turned to Lily, who was watching him, with a small, triumphant smile. "You were right," he told her. "You saw it when nobody else did." Lily shrugged, but her eyes were bright with emotion. "I just paid attention, that's all." William's mind was racing, trying to process the implications. If Ethan didn't have leukemia, if he'd been receiving unnecessary treatments for months, then what did that mean about Dr. Hammond? About the medical system he'd trusted so completely? About his own failure to question, to seek other opinions, to protect his son? "What happens now?" he asked Dr. Ramirez. "I recommend immediately discontinuing all current medications," she said firmly. "I'd like to see Ethan again in 2 weeks to run follow-up tests, just to establish a clear baseline. His body will need time to clear the chemotherapy drugs from his system, but children are remarkably resilient. His hair will grow back, his energy will return, and his immune system will strengthen." "And Dr. Hammond?" William's voice was tight with controlled anger. Dr. Ramirez's professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing a flash of her own outrage. "That's a more complicated question, Mr. Parker. If what we suspect is true, this is a serious ethical breach, possibly criminal. But we'll need more evidence before making any formal accusations." "What kind of evidence?" "Medical records from other patients. Testimony from lab technicians, proof of a pattern, not just a single case." She closed her folders decisively. "But that's not what you need to focus on right now. Your priority should be Ethan's recovery, not just physical, but emotional. Finding out you don't have a life-threatening disease when you've believed you did is wonderful news, but it can also be psychologically disorienting." William nodded, pulling his son close to his side. "Thank you, Dr. Ramirez, for everything." As they left the hospital, Ethan walked with a new lightness in his step, as if the news had already begun to transform him physically. Lily skipped alongside him, the two children laughing about something only they understood. William followed. A few paces behind, his relief mingled with a deep, simmering anger that would not be easily quenched. Back at the hotel, while the children swam in the indoor pool, an activity Dr. Ramirez had assured them was perfectly safe for Ethan, William made a series of phone calls, first to his lawyer, then to a private investigator he'd used for corporate matters, and finally to a journalist friend at the Boston Globe. The machinery of justice and exposure was now in motion, but as he watched Ethan through the pool areas, glass doors, swimming, splashing, laughing with Lily as if he'd been granted a new life, William knew that whatever happened next with Dr. Hammond, they had already won the most important battle. His son was healthy, and somehow improbably, it had taken a homeless 8-year-old girl with no medical training to help them discover that truth. Chapter 6. Unraveling the Deception. The Parker mansion was transformed in the weeks following their return from Massachusetts General Hospital. Gone were the medical equipment, the pill organizers, and the hushed hospital-like atmosphere. Windows that had been perpetually shuttered to protect Ethan's supposedly sensitive eyes were thrown open to welcome the crisp autumn air. The clinical smell of antiseptic was gradually replaced by the aroma of home-cooked meals and the subtle scent of the cinnamon candles Catherine had always loved. Most significantly, laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for too long. Ethan, freed from the burden of his non-existent disease, blossomed with each passing day. His energy returned in full force, his appetite increased, and faint stubble began to appear on his previously smooth scalp, the first sign of returning hair. Nurse Collins had been gently dismissed, though not before William had a long private conversation with her about Dr. Hammond's practices. She had been shocked by the revelation, insisting that she had only followed the doctor's orders and administered the medications as prescribed. William believed her. Sarah had always shown genuine care for Ethan, and her distress upon learning. The truth seemed sincere. "I should have noticed something," she'd said tearfully. "I'm trained to observe patients, to question treatments that don't seem to be working. I failed him too." But Ethan held no grudges. With the resilience of youth, he embraced his second chance, throwing himself into activities that had been forbidden during his illness. He played basketball in the driveway with Lily, went on long bike rides through the neighborhood, and even began making plans to return to school after the winter break. For William, however, the revelation of Dr. Hammond's deception had unleashed a storm of emotions that would not easily subside. Beneath his calm exterior, rage and guilt battled for dominance. How had he been so blind? How had he failed to question, to seek other opinions, to protect his son from this unnecessary suffering? 3 weeks after their visit to Dr. Ramirez, William sat in the study of Marcus Calloway, his longtime attorney and friend. Spread across the desk between them were medical records, insurance claims, and the preliminary findings of the private investigator William had hired. "We have enough." "To go to the authorities," Marcus said, tapping a thick folder. "The evidence is compelling, Will. Dr. Hammond has been falsifying lab results, not just for Ethan, but potentially for dozens of other patients. The insurance fraud alone would put him away for years." William nodded, his expression grim. "And the other families? Has your investigator identified them?" 17 so far, all following similar patterns. Wealthy families, children diagnosed with rare or unusual variants of disease, expensive experimental treatments not covered by insurance but paid for out-of-pocket by desperate parents. Marcus removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his toes. "It's diabolical in its simplicity, really. Hammond targeted families with means and influence, knowing they'd pay anything to save their children. Has he approached any of them yet?" "No, we agreed to wait until we had the full picture, but several have children currently undergoing treatment with Hammond, children who, like Ethan, may not actually need it." The thought sent a chill through William. While Ethan was recovering, other innocent children were still suffering, still receiving toxic medications for conditions they might not have. "We need to move quickly," he decided. "Contact the families, but discreetly. Suggest they seek second opinions without mentioning our suspicions directly. We don't want Hammond getting wind of this before we're ready." "Agreed. And the Boston Globe? Your journalist friend has been calling me daily. She's hungry for this story." William hesitated. Going public would mean exposing Ethan's situation, potentially subjecting him to unwanted attention during his recovery. Yet other families deserved to know the truth, deserved the chance to question their children's diagnoses before more damage was done. "Tell her we'll give her an exclusive, but not until we've contacted the authorities. This needs to be handled legally before it becomes a media circus." As William drove home, his mind returned to the moment everything had changed. Lily's innocent question, "What if you're not as sick as everyone thinks you are?" Without her, unique perspective, her attention to patterns that the adults had missed, Ethan might still be receiving unnecessary treatments, still believing he was fighting for his life against a disease he didn't have. The girl had transformed their lives in ways William could never have imagined when he'd discovered her in Ethan's bedroom that night, and now she was about to face another transition. The temporary guardianship arrangement William had established was nearing its end. Soon the family court would make decisions about Lily's permanent placement. He found the children in the backyard when he arrived home. Ethan was teaching Lily how to use his telescope, positioning it toward the early evening sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "You have to adjust the focus like this," Ethan was explaining, demonstrating with careful hands. "Then, you can see the craters on the moon super clearly." Lily leaned forward, peering through the eyepiece. "Whoa, it looks so close, like I could touch it." "Mom used to say that the moon was Earth's best friend," Ethan told her. "Always showing up even when it's partly hidden, going through its own changes but always coming back around." William paused at the patio door, reluctant to interrupt their moment. Watching them together, Ethan patient and animated, Lily curious and attentive, he was struck again by the unlikely bond that had formed between these two children from such different worlds. "Dad's home." Ethan called, spotting him through the glass door. "Dad, come see, Lily found Jupiter all by herself." William joined them, allowing himself to be pulled into their excitement about celestial bodies and space exploration. For a little while, he set aside thoughts of Dr. Hammond and legal proceedings, focusing instead on the simple joy of watching his son behave like a normal, enthusiastic child. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan lingered in the kitchen where William was reviewing more documents from Marcus. Is Dr. Hammond going to get in trouble? Ethan asked, sliding onto a stool at the counter. William looked up, weighing how much to share. Ethan had been through so much, William's instinct was still to protect him from difficult truths. But recent events had taught him that his son was stronger and more capable of understanding than he'd given him credit for. Yes, he is, William answered honestly. What he did to you, to all his patients, was wrong. Legally and morally wrong. Ethan nodded, absently running a hand over his head where fine dark hair was beginning to grow. Good. He should get in trouble, but what, buddy? What about the other kids? The ones who are still seeing him and taking medicine they might not need? William's chest tightened with pride at his son's concern for others, even in the midst of his own recovery. We're working on that. We're trying to reach their families, suggest they get second opinions like we did. Because of Lily, Ethan said. She's the one who figured it out first. Yes, because of Lily. William pushed aside the papers and gave his son his full attention. She saw something all the adults missed. She trusted her instincts when everyone else accepted what they were told. She saved me, Ethan said simply. The statement hung in the air between them, profound in its truth. This small girl who had nothing, no home, no family, no formal education, had saved his son from months or years of unnecessary treatment, had potentially saved other children as well. Dad, Ethan continued, his expression suddenly serious. What's going to happen to Lily when all this is over, when Dr. Hammond gets arrested and everything? It was the question William had been wrestling with for weeks. The family court hearing was scheduled for the following month. As a single father with a demanding career and a child recovering from trauma, his application to become Lily's permanent guardian faced significant challenges. The court-appointed social worker had been kind but non-committal about his chances. I don't know for sure, William admitted. I've applied to be her guardian, to give her a permanent home with us. But the decision isn't entirely up to me. They can't send her back to the streets, Ethan said, alarm rising in his voice, or to another group home. She hated it there. She said the older kids stole her things and the adults didn't care. I'm doing everything I can to prevent that, William promised. But the system is complicated, Ethan. They have to consider what's best for Lily. We're what's best for her, Ethan insisted. She's happy here, she's safe, she belongs with us now. The certainty in his son's voice resonated with William's own growing conviction. In the short time Lily had been with them, she had become an essential part of their household, not just because of what she'd done for Ethan, but because of who she was. Bright, resilient, perceptive Lily, who folded paper cranes from candy, wrappers and noticed patterns that others missed. I agree, William said, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen. The next morning brought an unexpected development. William's phone rang just as they were finishing breakfast. It was Marcus, his voice tight with urgency. Hammond knows something's up, he said without preamble. 3 families cancelled appointments yesterday after seeking second opinions. His office has been calling insurance companies about claim statuses. He's getting nervous. William glanced at the children who were clearing their breakfast dishes. How much time do we have? Not much. If he suspects he's being investigated, he could destroy evidence, flee the jurisdiction. Or worse, manipulate test results, to make it look like the children actually are ill. William finished, lowering his voice. We need to move now. I've contacted the State Medical Board and the District Attorney's Office. They're prepared to execute search warrants for his office and lab facilities tomorrow morning. But Marcus paused. They want statements. From affected families, especially yours. Ethan's case is the most thoroughly documented. William closed his eyes briefly. You'll have it. Today. After hanging up, he turned to find Lily watching him with that unnervingly perceptive gaze of hers. Dr. Hammond knows, doesn't he? She asked quietly. He suspects something, William confirmed, seeing no point in hiding the truth from her. We need to move faster than we planned. Ethan joined them, picking up on the tension. What's happening? William made a quick decision. We're going to the district attorney's office today to give official statements about what happened. Both of you should come. Your perspectives are important. Will it help the other kids? Ethan asked. Yes. and it will help make sure Dr. Hammond can't do this to anyone else. The district attorney's office was housed in an imposing government building downtown. William had arranged for them to meet with ADA Julia Chen, a prosecutor, known for her work on medical fraud cases. Her office was spare but not unwelcoming, with a small table where Ethan and Lily could sit comfortably during the interview. "Thank you for coming in so quickly," Julia said, after introductions were made. "I know this isn't easy to talk about, but your testimony is crucial to our case." Over the next 2 hours, they recounted the entire story. Ethan's initial diagnosis, the months of treatment, Lily's arrival and her observations, the second opinion from Dr. Ramirez, and the subsequent investigation. Julia recorded their statements, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting them tell their story in their own words. "Lily," she said gently, addressing the girl directly, "can you tell me more about why you first became suspicious? About Ethan's illness? What specifically did you notice?" Lily straightened in her chair, her expression serious. "He got sick on a schedule. Real sick people don't work like that. My friend Maria at the shelter had cancer, and she was sick all the time, not just on medicine days. And Ethan could still play and run even when he was supposed to be really sick. Maria couldn't do that. Her whole body was always tired." "And you shared these observations with Ethan?" "Yes, I asked him if maybe he wasn't as sick as everyone thought. It was just a question. I didn't know for sure." Julia nodded, making notes. "That was very perceptive of you. Many adults missed what you noticed." "Adults don't always see what's happening," Lily said with the simple wisdom of a child who had learned to survive by observation. "They're too busy looking for what they expect to see." The statement, delivered without judgment or accusation, struck William deeply. How much had he missed because he was looking for what he expected rather than what was actually there? As they were preparing to leave, Julia pulled William aside while the children gathered their things. "We're executing the warrants tomorrow at 9 a.m. Hammond's office, his lab, and his home simultaneously. The evidence from your private investigator gave us probable cause, but your family's testimony makes this case human, especially Lily's perspective." "Will the children need to testify if this goes to trial?" William asked, concerned about subjecting them to that stress. "Possibly, but we'll do everything we can to minimize their involvement. The documentation is strong, and if we find what we expect in Hammond's records, we may not need their direct testimony." "And the other families?" "We've reached out to all 17 that your investigator identified. 12 have already agreed to seek second opinions. 5 have confirmed findings similar to Ethan's, children who are much healthier than their supposed diagnoses would suggest." William felt a complex mixture of relief and anger. Relief that other children would be spared what Ethan had endured. Anger that the deception had been allowed to continue for so long. "Keep me updated," he requested. "These families will need support navigating the aftermath, just as we have." On the drive home, the atmosphere in the car was unusually quiet. Both children seemed subdued after reliving the experience at the DA's office. "You both did really well today," William told them. "I'm proud of how clearly you explained everything." "Is it over now?" Lily asked from the back seat. "Will the other kids get to stop taking medicine they don't need?" "It's starting to be over," William answered carefully. "These things take time, but yes, the other children will get help now." Ethan turned to look at Lily. "Remember what Dr. Ramirez said? Kids bounce back really fast. Once they stop the treatments, they'll start feeling better, just like I did." Lily nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "What happens to Dr. Hammond?" William met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "If the evidence shows he did what we think he did, he'll go to prison. What he did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal." "Good," Lily said with unexpected fierceness. "He hurt kids on purpose. He should be punished." The vehemence in her voice reminded William that despite her small size and young age, Lily had developed a strong moral compass through her difficult experiences. She understood injustice because she had faced it herself. The next morning, William's phone began ringing at 6:30 a.m. It was Marcus, his voice tense with excitement. "Turn on your TV, Channel 5, now." William fumbled for the remote, switching on the television in his bedroom. The local morning news was running a breaking story, complete with helicopter footage of police vehicles surrounding a stately colonial home in Brookline. Prominent Boston oncologist Dr. Robert Hammond was taken into custody early this morning, the reporter announced over the dramatic footage. Sources close to the investigation say Hammond is being charged with multiple counts of insurance fraud, medical malpractice, and child endangerment in connection with his pediatric oncology practice. The camera cut to a shot of Dr. Hammond being led out of his home in handcuffs, his distinguished face tight with fury and disbelief. The man who had caused Ethan months of unnecessary suffering, who had exploited the fears of desperate parents, was finally facing consequences. They moved up the timeline, Marcus explained over the phone, got a tip that Hammond was booking a flight to the Cayman Islands for tonight. They couldn't risk waiting. William sank onto the edge of his bed, overwhelmed by the sight of Hammond in custody. It's really happening. This is just the beginning, Will. The search warrants are being executed as we speak. The DA expects to find evidence of dozens more cases beyond the ones we identified. After hanging up, William sat for a moment, processing the implications. Then he heard movement in the hallway. The children were awake. They deserved to know what was happening. He found them in the kitchen where Lily was teaching Ethan how to make cinnamon toast the way Mrs. Winters had shown her. "I have news," William announced, drawing their attention. "Dr. Hammond was arrested this morning. It's on the news." Ethan's eyes widened. "Really? They got him?" "Yes, and they're searching his office and lab for evidence of other children he might have hurt." "So it's over?" Lily asked, the same question she'd posed the day before. This time, William could answer with more certainty. "The worst part is over. There will still be legal proceedings, investigations, maybe even a trial. But Hammond can't hurt anymore. Children now." The three of them stood in the kitchen, a makeshift family united by extraordinary circumstances. William looked at these two resilient children, his son recovering his strength and spirit day by day, and Lily, the unlikely hero who had changed everything with a simple, perceptive question. In that moment, he made a decision that had been forming in his heart for weeks. Whatever it took, legal battles, system navigation, any resource at his disposal, he would make Lily a permanent part of their family, not just out of gratitude for what she'd done for Ethan, but because she belonged with them now, because somehow in the midst of deception and illness and pain, they had found each other and formed a bond that deserved to be honored and preserved. "How about pancakes to celebrate?" he suggested. "We can watch the news while we eat." "With chocolate chips?" Ethan asked hopefully. "Definitely with chocolate chips," William agreed. "This is a chocolate chip pancake kind of day." As he gathered ingredients, William caught Lily watching him with a mix of hope and hesitation in her eyes. She still didn't fully trust that this new life was permanent, that she wouldn't eventually be sent away. He couldn't blame her. She'd learned through harsh experience that good things didn't last, that adults couldn't always be relied upon. But he silently vowed to prove her wrong. Some good things did last. Some families, even unconventional ones formed through strange and difficult circumstances, were meant to be together. And this family, broken and healing and finding its way forward, was definitely meant to be. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. 3 months had passed since Dr. Hammond's arrest, and winter had given way to the first tentative signs of spring in Boston. The story had exploded across national news outlets. Predatory doctor scams wealthy families with fake cancer diagnoses, generating weeks of headlines and outrage. The investigation had uncovered 34 cases in total, spanning nearly a decade of Hammond's practice. Some children, like Ethan, had been diagnosed with conditions they never had. Others had legitimate illnesses that were deliberately prolonged through manipulated test results and unnecessary treatments. The Parker family had weathered the media storm as privately as possible, declining interviews and camera appearances despite lucrative offers. William's priority had been protecting both children from unwanted attention during this time of transition and healing. And healing had come in more ways than one. Ethan's physical recovery had progressed remarkably. His hair had grown back, in thick and dark, just like before. His strength and energy had returned completely, allowing him to rejoin his classmates at school after winter break. There had been questions, of course, and stares from children who had heard fragments of the story from their parents. But Ethan faced them with a newfound resilience, neither hiding from his experience nor letting it define him. The emotional recovery was more complex. There had been nightmares in the beginning, dreams where Ethan was still sick, still taking medications that made him vomit and weakened his body. There had been moments of anger, too, sudden flares of rage at having been deceived, at having lost months of his childhood to a lie. William had enlisted the help of Dr. Sophia Mendez, a child psychologist specializing in medical trauma, to help Ethan process these feelings. Their weekly sessions had become a cornerstone of his recovery, a safe space to express the complicated emotions that sometimes overwhelmed him. "It's normal to feel angry," Dr. Mendez had assured him during their first session. "You were hurt by someone you were supposed to trust, someone who was supposed to help you." "I'm not just angry for me," Ethan had confided. "I'm angry for the other kids too. Some of them were really little. They couldn't even understand what was happening to them." This capacity for empathy, for thinking beyond his own experience to consider others, was part of what made William so fiercely proud of his son. Trauma could harden some people, turn them inward and defensive, but Ethan had emerged from his ordeal with an expanded heart, a deeper awareness of others' suffering. For Lily, the past months had brought equally significant changes. The temporary guardianship had been extended, while William's petition for permanent adoption proceeded through the family court system. The process was complex, involving home studies, interviews, background checks, and multiple court appearances. But William had the advantages of resources, a stable home, and increasingly, evidence that Lily was thriving in their care. She had begun attending the same private school as Ethan, placed in the 3rd grade after assessment tests revealed she was remarkably bright, despite gaps in her formal education. Those gaps were closing quickly. Lily approached learning with the same intensity and focus she brought to everything she cared about, soaking up knowledge like a desert absorbing rain. Her teacher, Ms. Abernathy, had called William after the first month to express her amazement. "Lily has the most extraordinary mind," she'd told him. "She doesn't just memorize information. She connects it, questions it, applies it in unexpected ways, and her mathematical intuition is truly exceptional." But academic progress was only part of Lily's transformation. The more significant changes were subtler. The way she no longer hid food in her pockets at dinner, the fact that she had stopped sleeping with her shoes on, the gradual relaxation of her vigilance. She was beginning, cautiously, to trust that this home was permanent, that she wouldn't suddenly find herself back on the streets. On a bright Saturday in early April, William stood in the doorway of the sunroom, watching the children play chess, at a small table by the window. Ethan had been teaching Lily the game for weeks, and she had progressed from novice to formidable opponent with remarkable speed. "Check," Lily announced, moving her knight with a flourish. Ethan studied the board, frowning in concentration. You're getting too good at this. Maybe I shouldn't have taught you my secret strategies." "They weren't very secret," Lily teased. "You talk to yourself when you're thinking hard." "I do not." "Yes, I do. You whisper the moves you're considering, like, maybe knight to f3, no, that leaves the bishop exposed." Ethan groaned as Lily mimicked his muttering perfectly. "Great. So you can read my mind and beat me at chess." Their easy banter, the natural back and forth of siblings, warmed William's heart. In the midst of all the legal complexities and emotional challenges, this simple moment of childhood joy felt like a victory. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Marcus. "The judge just signed the final approval," his friend said, without preamble. "The adoption is official. Congratulations, Will, you're officially a father of 2. William's breath caught. After months of paperwork, hearings, and anxious waiting, it was done. Lily was legally his daughter, as much a Parker as if she had been born into the family. "Thank you, Marcus," he managed, emotion making his voice rough. "For everything." Don't thank me. Thank that remarkable little girl. She changed all your lives. Marcus paused. The certificate will be ready for pickup on Monday, but I thought you'd want to know right away. After hanging up, William stood, quietly for a moment, absorbing the news. Then he stepped fully into the sunroom. Sorry to interrupt the chess championship, but I have some news I think you'll want to hear. Both children looked up, Ethan curious, Lily instantly alert. Some habits of caution hadn't fully faded. I just got a call from Marcus, William continued, focusing on Lily. The judge signed the final papers today. The adoption is official, Lily. You're officially a Parker now. This is your forever home. Lily's green eyes widened, her small face a study in disbelief and dawning joy. Really? It's done? Nobody can take me away? Nobody, William confirmed. Not ever. You're my daughter now, legally and in every other way that matters. Ethan let out a whoop of celebration, jumping up to hug Lily, who sat frozen in her chair, overwhelmed by the news. I told you it would happen. I told you Dad wouldn't let anything stop it. Slowly, as if moving through a dream, Lily stood up. She looked at William, her expression a mixture of vulnerability and hope that made his throat tighten. I can stay forever? This is really my home now. William knelt down to her level, meeting her eyes directly. Yes, Lily. This is your home, and we are your family, forever. She launched herself into his arms then, her small body trembling. William held her close, feeling the dampness of tears against his shoulder. Over her head he met Ethan's eyes, seeing his son's own joy and tears. Group hug, Ethan declared, joining them on the floor and wrapping his arms around both his father and his new sister. Official Parker family group hug. They stayed that way for a long moment. This unlikely family forged through pain and healing, deception and truth, loss and unexpected finding. When they finally separated, Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her smile wobbling but determined. So, she said, her voice only slightly unsteady, do I have to take the Parker name, or can I just be Lily? That's entirely up to you, William assured her. You can be Lily Parker or just Lily or any combination you choose. She considered this seriously. I think I'd like to be Lily Parker. I never had a last name that meant anything before. But Parker means family. It means you and Ethan. Lily Parker it is, William agreed, his heart so full it seemed impossible to contain all he was feeling. How should we celebrate? Ice cream, Ethan suggested immediately. A giant ice cream feast. And can we call Dr. Ramirez? Lily added. To tell her the news? She helped make this happen too. William nodded, touched by her thoughtfulness. Dr. Ramirez had indeed been instrumental, not just in uncovering the truth about Ethan's health, but also in supporting their family through the aftermath. She had provided medical documentation for the adoption proceedings, testifying to the positive impact Lily had on Ethan's well-being. We'll definitely call Dr. Ramirez and anyone else you want to share the news with. Mrs. Winters, too, Lily decided, and Ms. Abernathy, and Sarah. William smiled at her growing list. It was another sign of how far she'd come, from a child with no connections to one with a growing circle of important relationships. The rest of the day unfolded in a celebration that was both ordinary and extraordinary. They went for ice cream at Lily's favorite shop in Harvard Square, where she solemnly ordered a triple scoop for the special occasion. They called Dr. Ramirez, who expressed genuine delight at the news. They visited the Museum of Science, where both children marveled at the electricity demonstration that made their hair stand on end. That evening after dinner, William presented Lily with a small gift box. A little something to mark the day, he explained as she carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a silver locket, simple but elegant. When Lily opened it, she found a tiny photograph of the three of them, taken during their trip to New Hampshire the previous month. They were standing at the summit of a small mountain they'd hiked together, their faces flushed with exertion and happiness. It's beautiful, she whispered, running her finger over the smooth silver surface. Turn it over, William instructed, gently. On the back, a single word was engraved, family. Lily looked up at him, her eyes bright. Without words, She handed him the necklace and turned around, lifting her hair so he could fasten it around her neck. The locket settled against her chest, catching the light as she breathed. "Thank you," she said simply, touching it with reverent fingers. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, William found himself drawn to Catherine's photograph in his study. He picked it up, tracing the outline of her smiling face. "I wish you could see them," he told her quietly. "Ethan is so strong, so compassionate. He's going to be okay, Katie, better than okay. And Lily, you would love her. She's brilliant and fierce and tender all at once. She saved our son. And in a way she saved me too." He could almost hear Catherine's response, could imagine her gentle teasing about how it had taken a homeless child to teach him to question authority, to look beyond the surface, to trust his instincts as a father. "I know," he whispered to the silence. "I'm learning. Better late than never, right?" The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring Sunday. William was making pancakes, a weekend tradition now, when Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway still in his pajamas. "Dad, can we talk about something important?" William flipped a pancake before turning to face his son. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up," Ethan said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "I've decided I want to be a doctor, but not like Dr. Hammond. A real doctor, who actually helps people." William's spatula paused, mid-air. "That's a big decision. What kind of doctor are you thinking?" "A pediatric oncologist like Dr. Ramirez. I want to help kids who are really sick, not pretend kids." Ethan's expression was earnest, his eyes clear and determined. "I know what it feels like to think you're dying. And I know what it feels like when someone helps you realize you're not. I want to do that for other kids." Pride and emotion welled up in William's chest. His son had taken a traumatic experience and transformed it into purpose, into a desire to prevent others from suffering as he had. "I think that's a wonderful goal," he said, managing to keep his voice steady. "Dr. Ramirez would be proud to hear it." "Morning." Lily's voice broke into their conversation as she bounced into the kitchen, already dressed for the day in jeans and her favorite blue sweater. The silver locket gleamed at her throat. "Are those blueberry pancakes?" "My favorite." "As requested by the newest official member of the Parker family," William confirmed, sliding a plate toward her. As they ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing easily between serious topics and silly jokes, William marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A year ago he had been a grieving widower with a supposedly dying son, going through the motions of living while preparing for loss. Now he sat at a table filled with laughter and future plans, with a son who dreamed of healing others, and a daughter whose perceptiveness had changed everything. The story of how they became a family was unusual, marked by pain and deception, but also by courage and truth. It wasn't the story William would have chosen or imagined for himself and Ethan after Catherine's death, but it was their story now, his, Ethan's, and Lily's together, and he wouldn't change a word of it. Outside, the cherry trees in the garden were beginning to blossom, their delicate pink flowers opening to the spring sunshine. Like those blossoms, this family had emerged from a long winter into something new and beautiful, fragile perhaps, still growing, but undeniably alive and full of promise. Later that afternoon, the Parker family hosted a small gathering to celebrate Lily's adoption. Dr. Ramirez came along with Mrs. Winters, Ethan's teacher, Mr. Collins, and several of the other families whose children had been victims of Dr. Hammond's scheme. These families had formed a support network over the past months, helping each other navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges of recovery. As William watched Lily move confidently among the guests, accepting congratulations and introducing herself proudly as Lily Parker, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A homeless child with keen eyes and a brave heart, a sick boy who wasn't really sick, a desperate father who had trusted too easily and questioned too little. And now, a family. Unconventional, perhaps, formed through unusual circumstances, definitely, but real and solid and true in all the ways that mattered. The celebration continued into early evening, with cake and speeches and many heartfelt embraces. When the last guest had departed, William found Ethan and Lily sitting on the porch swing, looking up at the emerging stars. "Did you know," Ethan was saying, "that some stars we see are actually already gone? Their light takes so long to reach us that by the time we see it, the star itself might have died." "That's kind of sad," Lily replied, swinging her legs thoughtfully, "but also nice in a way, like they get to keep shining even after they're gone." "Yeah, that's how I think about Mom sometimes. She's gone, but her light is still here with us." William paused in the doorway, moved by his son's perspective. Then he joined them on the porch, sitting on Lily's other side so she was nestled between them. "Room for one more stargazer?" he asked. "Always," Ethan replied, scooting over to make more space. Together, they watched the night sky deepen to indigo, then black, the stars emerging one by one until the heavens were a glittering canvas above them. None of them felt the need to speak. They simply existed together in the peaceful moment. A family bound not by blood, but by something perhaps even stronger, by choice, by healing, by the shared journey from darkness into light. And if Catherine was indeed watching from somewhere among those stars, William was certain she was smiling.